Hey, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'm sure more people will join as we go, and there's nothing wrong with that. I am Gavin Sundwall. I'm the Counselor for Public Affairs for Mission Australia. Uh, from the US originally, of course. Been lucky enough to have been here in Australia for a couple of years. And I have to admit, we're going to spend some time today with one of my favorite people in Australia, Amanda Rose, legend, icon, uh, entrepreneur, motivational speaker. And as my team and I were thinking of people that we thought we wanted to hear from most and others might like to hear from during this time with COVID and dealing with the situation that none of us have faced in our lifetime, we thought, who better to hear from than you, Amanda? So thank you very much for agreeing to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Uh, just at the outset, I wanted to say this is part of U.S. Mission Australia's program called Diplomacy Delivered. Since we're all at home or at work in small numbers and practicing social distancing, we're going to try to do more virtually. And so again, to all of you tuning in today, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and spending some time with us. There's a chat function at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions for Amanda that you would like asked, do please put your questions into the chat function and we'll get to as many as we can. And I might remind you going as we go forward. So Amanda, again, you've had quite the career in business and also working on women's issues in Australia and globally. Thank you very much for your time today. I think that any question needs to start with what we're all going through now. So how are you going? What are you doing to help get yourself through this time of COVID-19?
It's interesting. It's a good question. I see this as just yet one example of a difficult situation that a person, an individual or a business or a company goes through. So it shouldn't, personally, straight away, I don't see it as a one-off situation. It's just yet another difficult environment as a businesswoman, as a person that you're going through. And I have the attitude of when things are difficult, how can I make the most of that scenario or that situation? And often it means you have to put in twice as much effort, maybe for less return, but often in the end it pays off. So have the attitude of I've invested a lot more during this time. So I've never been busier personally. So yes, a lot of people want to know if I have two companies, and one in particular, I run workshops for large corporates and do a lot of keynote speaking. And obviously, if you can't do that in person, that business drops, and it has. There are some people that want to do it virtually, which is great. But in general, that's pretty much 80% of that just literally within a week disappeared. And so instead of thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? One of my companies has reduced the amount of income. I thought, well, actually, I just increased 80% of my time. So I then took advantage of the time that I had, and I launched Small Business Women Australia, which is, a national free to be a part of group for women in small business, regardless of the size, to give them free advice on a weekly basis over 30 weeks to help them through this. And have leaders from different industries speak on that. So that's just an example of what I've done. I've also running free Facebook Live sessions for my other business for Western Sydney women and business women. And again, experts once a week going on answering questions and helping business women through this. So, where there's a loss of income is obviously a loss of time. How can you then, how I took the attitude of how I can make the most of that time, plus of course some baking and gardening.
I'm glad you're leaving some time for yourself as well. I've been reminded that it's also, as you're trying to take care of everyone else, it's important to leave time for yourself. You got to take care of you also. So thank you for that. Hey, as you're talking, particularly to women entrepreneurs, what are you hearing from them? How are they getting through this time? Are there any lessons for the rest of us that you've picked up that you might want to share?
So, obviously, there's two groups of people, ones that have been forced to shut down. So the impact for those that have been forced to shut down, obviously, it's been quite a shock because this is not anything that they've prepared for. And I've seen some of those women really be strategic and smart and savvy and turn their business online, even hairdressers, by doing tutorials and sending out packs. We forget we've got Australia Post, and sending out packs to their clients and building their community. Then there are a group of businesses that are still running, but their business has obviously dropped dramatically. So if anything, the ones that are taking this in a there's not much we can do, it is what it is approach, are finding out what the government has available, discussing things with their banks, trying to get rent reduced, with their landlords, doing everything they humanly possibly can, because those that are proactive about this, because you can't change the scenario, but doing the best out of it, will come out at the end more successful and more prepared to start up again, rather than those sitting there reading, the news and the media 5 hours a day, panicking and not getting anything done. So it's like the early bird gets the worm. It's like the ones that are out there being proactive, talking with their employees. For example, I know some people that are going for the JobKeeper payment that's available, and even though their employees don't have anything to do, they're going out to volunteer because it's an essential service that they can say, or a lot of the volunteers have dropped off from charities because they were elderly. Can we go and help them? So, I've been saying keep your employees busy, but also be strategic in what you can do with your businesses. So a lot of the women I'm dealing with are feeling the hit, but there's still opportunities out there. There's still grants out there for government, not only COVID grants, but there are actual other grants available still running. So this is another thing. Business is still going, government is still going. There's still large infrastructure firms, construction. There are a lot of things still happening. There's jobs at supermarkets. So I'm trying to change, the mindset of it's not the end of the world. It's just the end of this particular chapter, or it's not particularly nice, but what can we do to change our thoughts and also our opportunities?
Very valuable advice there, and thank you for that, especially on how to make the best use of this time. You sort of hinted at this as well in your answer. Is it too soon to be thinking about how to position a business for coming out of COVID-19? I know
No.
we, well, do continue. So what, for now, we're all practicing social distancing. We're following the guidance from government. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but this will pass. And so, if I'm a small business, particularly in your conversations you're having with women entrepreneurs, what are some ways that you recommend positioning ourselves to be ready to take advantage when we come out of it?
Well, I find that true entrepreneurs, thrive in difficult situations because this is the opportunity to look for different strategies and ideas that no one else has thought of. Because essentially, successful businesses and services and products come out of the fact of a need. So right now, people have been forced in a very awkward, uncomfortable position. That's when great ideas come out. So preparing for the comeback, because this will end. And a lot of people need to know that this is just another difficult situation. And mind you, there will be others too. So people need to be aware of what can you learn now, what policies, procedures you can put in place now for next time something difficult happens. But yes, start planning now. I'm not saying don't do anything to survive now, but you need to be planning for the future. So that could be simply, what foundations do you need to set in your business for when it does come back? You're not playing catch up. A lot of people, if they're not investing their time wisely now, we're going to be falling over themselves trying to play catch up and get their piece of the market share when things come back. It's the opportunity to look at your strategy of your business, what works, what hasn't worked, what do I want to come back as? Do I want to change? Do I want to shift our departments? Do I shift my vision of what I want to do? And entrepreneurs really do thrive. So now's the time to build the relationships that you need to build to succeed in the future. So you don't need to be face to face in a networking opportunity or a meeting to build relationships. 80%, I would say at least 80% of what I do is done behind the scenes, and no one knows the relationships, the joint ventures, the programs, whatever it is that I'm doing until it's actually done. So you've got a good solid couple of months and it will go quickly. And that's what people don't realize. It will go very quickly to build those relationships, design programs, get things ready to hit the ground running, whether it's the end of the year or even 2021. So I'm doing a lot of planning now for 2021. So that will just roll out smoothly.
How do you build those relationships, particularly at a time when you can't really go out and meet people?
Yes, well, first know what you want. So again, when I said talk about, working on your business, it's step back of, okay, where do I see myself in a year from now? What do I want my business to be focusing on? What's my specialty? What's my brand? And then go and find relevant people and organizations that align with you. Now, they might be suffering right now, but in the future, they're not. For example, I run a program for a mentoring program for women in aviation. And obviously, the aviation industry has been hit. So everyone was like, oh no, what are you going to do? They've been hit. I said, well, that's even more reason why we need to be doing the mentoring program. Keep the momentum, because when it does come back, we need our women ready to go and ready for the employment opportunities. So I'm reaching out and I'm constantly in discussion with that industry of what we can help with now, because we obviously want our market and our women to take those opportunities. So pick up the phone, good old conversation on the phone. LinkedIn is a great opportunity to reach out to people that are in line with what you want to do. Send an email, have Zoom meetings. There are so many things you can do. And you can handwrite on a card and write letters too. So if you wanted to reconnect with people that to say thank you, or even to ask for something or to discuss something, you can write a card. But now, I'm not encouraging people just to blanket contact people, because that's frustrating at the best of times, but be very targeted and say, this is what I'd like to achieve out of it. This is what I'm thinking. Would you like to be part of it, for the future? And people either say yes or no.
And it sounds like even in this digital age, the personal touch still matters.
Oh, absolutely. So we've been sending out actual packs to people that we run programs with, and I send out letters all the time and cards. This should be happening anyway. And yes, technology is great and it can speed things up, but we're still human. And we still like, to touch and to feel and to also feel appreciated, and have things relevant to whatever that program is. So I do challenge people during this time to think differently of what can you send from your business or partner with another business and send it to your clients, your customers, to people you're building a relationship with, to connect with them, but using, Careers in Australia Post.
Fabulous. Thank you. Hey, we do have some initial questions in, and mindful that it's not just me speaking with you, but we have an audience. Would it be okay to ask a few and before we move on to another topic?
Absolutely.
So our first question is from Anne-Marie Walton, and it's how important are personal networks and connections versus marketing when expanding your business into countries, especially into a country like the United States?
I would say both equally important, but I would start with the personal connection first. So, and the reason why I say that is the personal connection can give you the advice to help guide your marketing, especially when you're entering new markets, and especially international markets. So there are key people that it's their specialty to help you with that. But if you have a good, strong relationship with them, they can advise you on the best way about it. Often people might jump the gun and think, I've got this great idea, this great product, and yes, people might want it, but if you're marketing it in the wrong way, maybe hitting the wrong, for example, if going to the US, you're targeting the wrong state. They don't specialize in that, so they're not interested. So that's why I say relationships first, then marketing second, because relationships can open doors for you that marketing can't, and also give you that gold advice that you can only get one-on-one from someone who genuinely believes in you and what you have to offer.
That's also a nice segue into what we wanted to talk to you about next, which is your relationship with the United States. So can you talk a little bit about that? And then I should say at the top of that, we got to know you in part not just because you had done all these amazing things in Sydney, but because you were kind enough to go on a program that we sponsored, our international uh, visitors program for leadership development. We identified you, I think, rightly as an up and coming leader in Australia, but it's your story, not mine.
Well, we'll start with my little pin that I have with the Australian and the US flag, which I love to wear, and I have quite a few of them. Um, so yes, I was absolutely blessed to be chosen actually to represent the Oceanic region, which was fantastic for women in entrepreneurship. And we spent 3 weeks visiting 4 different states in the US. But my what I absolutely loved was not only looking at another country in particular. I mean, I personally have always had a passion for the United States since I was little, so this was, a dream come true. But to see how things were done at scale, for example, but also how things are done differently. I found that in the United States, in particular, women entrepreneurs and startups were taken more seriously than they were in Australia. So they had the support over there, and they supported each other really, really well. And I connected and related to that because that's how I do business. So it was very refreshing for me to meet, groups of women entrepreneurs in different departments and say, oh, anything you need, we'll give it to you. Because what you learn, you'll grow and then you'll give back. And it was very refreshing. So I literally spent 3 weeks learning, and I'm still connected to every single person that I met over there. And even the women that I went on the group with, we have a private WhatsApp group, and we're still connected as well. And I'm doing all my brainstorming, mind you, to try and get them all into Australia somehow, or meet back up in the US to do a conference or something like that, because they're all leaders in their own fields. But I found in particular with the US, there is a very strong support network, whether you're male or female, but for women in particular, if you come up with an idea, if you want to start a business, everyone was there to support you, whether it was the government, another group, an organization, other women. It was really quite phenomenal.
Well, it's good to see you practicing what you preach, so to speak, in terms of relationships. It sounds like these relationships are ones you maintain even to this day and take strength from.
Absolutely. And I can ask them and they ask me. So I'm always available if they have a question. So the one thing that I specialized in that they ask me of is how to build communities, but diverse communities, which is, what I do with Western Sydney Women. And we're pretty much the most diverse region in the world when you think of 130 different countries are represented within 3 million people. So they always ask me, how do you do that? But then on the flip side, I ask them, and they're starting and running programs and businesses that I'd love to apply here. So I'm very much, oh, how did you do that? So it's, cross border relationship building, but information sharing is crucial. We can't live in a bubble and just assume we know everything in Australia, because, the second you think you know everything, you know nothing.
Excuse me, it sounds a little Game of Thrones ish there. What Ygritte said to Jon Snow, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." But I would like to get back to Western Sydney Women in particular and your involvement with them. But before we do, were there other things about your time in the U.S. on this program that surprised you, particularly about the entrepreneurship culture and women's role in that culture of entrepreneurship?
Well, they're very fierce, so I felt like I kind of found my own tribe in a lot of ways, because they were very strategic, very thorough with their numbers. They weren't just, oh, I've got a great idea, it was all about the bottom line. the funding as well. So, administration funding, government funding from all levels, from, New York City, like Denver, for example, being the startup capital, and the amount of investment that there's been placed into making sure that the startup capital in America was huge. And watching the women thrive and run very successful businesses and being so open to share anything with me. And they said, sure, you want our business plan on how that works? I'll send it to you, which you just don't get in Australia. So that was very refreshing. But I see that it's the movement for women being able to be successful is huge in the US and not so much in Australia. So I'm very much trying to bring that culture as much as possible to Australia nationally, and start in my town, and then hopefully spread it, and then potentially have some of the women in the US have succeeded so well that I met to come over and speak to women entrepreneurs here, because we really do have a barrier in this country of the fear. But in the US, they're fearless, and I like that.
Interesting. If that's something that you feel that Australian women could learn from US business women, US entrepreneurs who are women, are there lessons that your American friends can learn from Aussies as well?
Yes, diversity is a big thing. Maybe also two things: diversity and our laid backness, to a degree that, for example, when this happened, this scenario, I was quite chilled about it. I was more annoyed with the media only talking about this particular topic, this virus, instead of actually talking about feel good stories, because business is still going. But yeah, so I think there's the diversity piece where I found that they struggled to understand that you can have a common purpose and come from a completely different background, culture, environment, that you can all still work together for that common purpose. And I think it's very siloed in America, even though the desire is to bring everyone together. I think that diversity piece and that multicultural piece on the common purpose is something that I've been helping with, and would love to continue helping with, because we've managed to do it so well with Western Sydney. But also, chilling out a little bit more.
Well, as a self-proclaimed Type A American, I'm with you on that. I think we could all gain a valuable lesson from Australian friends on learning to appreciate life. We often say that in the US, we live to work. I think in Australia, you've got the right balance of work to live. Not that the work isn't important, but not to the point that you forget to live at the same time.
Exactly.
So as an American, I take away something from that, and thanks for that. Okay, I wanted to go to our questions again. So this one is from Sophie Wilson. Is resilience something that you have actively worked on and cultivated? If so, how?
Okay, this is a good question. Resilience, whew, a lot of people want it. So resilience builds over time. And I find that the only way you build resilience is to not resist difficult situations. So don't avoid them, don't run away from them. When something your face is difficult, push through it, but also how you deal with that difficult situation. So if you panic, stress out, and you're irrational, you're not learning from it. And next time it happens, you'll have the same response. So resilience is something that is built definitely layer by layer over time, because you'll find, and if you want to know if you're resilient, because a lot of people don't know if they are, when a difficult scenario arises, think to yourself, well, the last time this happened to me, how did I respond, and why am I not as affected by it? And so it's very much, okay, step back and look at it objectively, regardless of how it's affected you personally or with your business. How can you be strategic and smart and self-controlled in responding to that? And then you learn from that. Often it's like, well, what can we learn from this? Like this environment right now, what can we do to learn from this situation? We can't change it. We need to learn from it. And then the next time something happens, you're like, oh yeah, I've been through that before. I went through the GFC, working for a business whilst also having my own. And then, we succeeded because we took a different approach. It was tough. It was very difficult. But then after that, when other things happen, it's like, oh yeah, I've been through this before. We know you can handle it. So it's kind of that trust in yourself that, yep, been through this before, handled it this way. This is what I'm going to do next time. So resilience isn't something you're just born resilient. Yeah, I can handle it. It's essentially not avoiding difficult conversations, difficult situations. Often we avoid them. Even, when things are going well and something faces us, we don't have to deal with that. You need to deal with it. And the more you deal with it, the easier it becomes. And a good sign, especially for the ladies out there, that people may call you cold or ruthless or things like that because things don't impact you as much. But that's not true. It just means that you're resilient. Doesn't mean you don't have feelings or empathy, that you're strategic, but it's the fact that you don't get emotionally caught up in a situation, that you can, with a clear mind, make the right choices for you, your family, and your business.
And it sounds like have confidence in yourself that you have handled situations in the past. Keep
Absolutely.
open mind to learn from them and keep refining as you go forward.
Absolutely. You've got to make, and that's where the tough decisions come into it. So often we're faced and we have to make some really tough decisions, and life isn't always easy. And running a business and being an entrepreneur, you take a lot of risk, but you make some really tough decisions. And it could mean, not working with a particular person, particular organization, whatever it is. And there's that fear of, oh, they might not like me or this might happen. No, you've got to be very ruthless with your time, compassionate with others, but ruthless with your own time and where you're headed. But the more you go through and handle it in a very objective, unemotional way, the more resilient you become.
Thanks for that. And speaking of being ruthless with time, we've got another question. Trying to work as many in as we can. This is from Leonard Gregory. How important is reputation at this time? Reputation with customers, employees, suppliers.
Well, you'll find out because right now, if you haven't spent the last 1, 10, 20 years building a good reputation with everyone that you work with, now is the time you're going to hurt more than others. So you'll find those that have a good quality brand, good relationships with the people that they work with, they will survive and potentially thrive in this environment because they've put in the effort and they've been reliable, they've been trustworthy, and so forth. But if there is a bad relationship there, or you haven't put in the effort, your branding essentially is, could be the one hit wonder. You don't really care about your clients, could be about monies, or you care about and things like that. You're going to feel it because right now communities are bonding together. So they're reaching out to who is it that I have worked with before, or that I feel I can trust, or that I want to support, and they're the people they're working with. So if anything, it's going to be a filtering process. Times of trials like this, you're going to see those that haven't treated people very well or with respect will struggle and possibly drop off. And those that have got good quality, strong relationships will survive and potentially, double with their brand value because of how they're handling it.
Thank you for that. We've got another question that takes us back to resilience a bit.
Yes.
So the question from Michael is, how would you prepare in advance? I would say, can you prepare in advance for uncontrollable influences, such as people falling ill and being incapacitated rather than in general, like dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic?
You can't predict what's going to happen. Like you couldn't predict that this was going to happen. But what you can do is put, in a structural way, put things in place to prepare for that type of scenario. So, for example, that's why I talk about with resilience that every hard time you go through, if you make the right decisions and you learn from that, you're more resilient next time. For example, right now, it's okay, you've got time to set up policies, procedures. A lot of people are going online that never gone online before. So next time something like this happens where it affects the face-to-face business, they can quickly say, well, actually, we've built an online business. This is fine. When it comes to sickness and things like that, often So every time I bring someone on board, I make sure that they document their own job and their own policies and procedures and how they do everything that they do. So therefore, if they have to leave, and not just from sickness, it could be a family issue, because I believe that, you don't work people to death. If they need to go and look after their family, off you go. But then here is a manual, essentially, to a degree, to give to someone else, say this is how that job is done. So it's always preparing to have not one source of failure. So, for example, for the entrepreneur, it could be you. If you're the only one that can do what you do, then you've got a big problem if you're sick or something happens with you. So I always say prepare and document as much as possible to be able to hand off to another person. It could be a financial preparation of 3 months to 6 months in the bank account of cash flow. You'll find that right now everyone's freaking out they don't have the cash flow, which will be a wake-up call, because a lot of the SME businesses that do have strong cash flow right now are being strategic and be able to keep their staff on and pivot under calm circumstances instead of panicking. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you for that. And let me work one more in, if I could, before we move on to the next area that I'd like to ask you about. This is from, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, Gracieta Ferreira. I am one of the fortunate industries still going, construction. I've been trying to inform my employees of what we're doing to secure their income and the need for them to play their part in keeping the industry open. Although I do this regularly, they are still quite worried. How can I better convey the message to them?
That's a good question. So actually, what I told my team across my businesses straight away is turn off the news, and said do not read or anything. So because fear incites fear and panic, and all they need to know is what the government is saying. So what the federal, state, and what relevant state governments are saying for your business. So as long as you can constantly communicate with them or have a regular, for example, every morning you send out a message saying this is what the government has said and this is how we're handling it and this is how we're responding to it, then they'll know that that's the only source of information they need to listen to. They don't need to jump onto Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and get panicked by everything, because that's essentially what it is. 80% of people, it's fear. And if you're following the guidelines and you're doing everything right, which I know you are because you're in construction and you would have been up until now anyway, it's very much of saying it's business as usual. Yes, we've applied all of these extra practices, but just listen to our 9 a.m. or 6 a.m. email or group phone call that we're doing to say how we're responding to what recently has happened, but it's business as usual. And also try and keep normality as well in business. So when they get onto the construction site, keep things as normal as possible. Maybe give them lunches on a Friday. Yes, they all have to stand 1.5 meters apart, from each other eating it, but get it delivered. And that way you're supporting small business. But really it's top down. So how you're going to handle something is how your staff are going to handle that. So if you're calm, in controlled, and trusted with your information, then they're going to be the same.
And I'm hearing from you how important constant, regular communication is.
Yes, and also I find the same time, keep as much as possible, especially with your organization, if it's in the mornings, to say this time every morning, we're going to communicate whatever's relevant to your job and what you're doing. And then privately, one-on-one, if they want to reach out to you, being the boss, always be available and just say, look, happy to have a chat, check in on those that are worrying a little bit more, to say everything's fine. We've got, procedures in place, everything's good, and keep reassuring people, but how you handle it is going to send a ripple effect. But yeah, constant communication. It means as a boss, and I know this as an employer, that you have to be on top of absolutely everything and always out there. You're the one reading the news. You're the one making sure you know everything, but you do that to make sure that your team can focus on the job and also enjoy life during this time.
I like that. We're back to enjoying life again, which is always good. Something I think during COVID-19 we don't want to lose sight of.
No, we don't.
Let's go back to you, if you don't mind. In your experience, what would you say are three of your top keys to success? If you could kind of identify three things that have helped you reach where you are, what are they, and what would you recommend to people joining us today?
Okay, so I would say the first one would be your passion. And I know it's a bit of a fluffy word that people can misinterpret, but essentially, everyone's got a purpose. Everyone has inside of them a drive to do something. So it could be to start a business, be a CEO, help in the education sector, whatever it is, it's in you. And usually you're really passionate when you talk about it. And people go, oh, why don't you become a teacher? Or why don't you do this? You need to identify what that is, because that will just flourish every time you speak, but also get you up really early to finish off what you need to get done or push you through the hard times. So take the time to really articulate what it is that your purpose is, and what your core is, not what people tell you it should be, really what it is that it's in you. So knowing that helps you set your vision of what you want to achieve. So that's definitely number one. Number two would be hard work. And the reason why I say that is because no one says that. I think, social media and a lot of, business out there, or people in general, kind of just talk about, again, the first point of having your passion. That's all you need, but that's not true at all. You need that for your vision, yes. But then once you have it, you've got to really work hard. And working hard just doesn't mean just the time you put into it, but the choices that you make. So you need to sacrifice a lot to succeed. So, are you wasting time, using your social media, but in an effective way? Are you watching 10 to 20 hours a week on reality TV when you could be spending 10 to 20 hours a week working on your business? So you are 100% responsible for the effort you put into what is that you want to achieve. So you really got to ask yourself, am I really putting in the hard work, or am I just saying I'm putting in hard work a couple of hours a day? And the third one I would say is relationship building. And that's not just as knowing as many people as you can, which people misunderstand that. It's actually quality relationship building. And some of them can take up to 10 years. Some relationships I started 10 years ago, I'm starting to work with now. And that's time. So you can't avoid that. That's just something that you have to do, and it takes time to do that, but the right relationship. So going out and caring about what the other person, what their passion is. And I always like to align myself with other people that put in as much hard work as I do. I have a saying that if you put in effort, I will support you in what you're doing, because effort says a lot about the person's character, and whether they're going to succeed or not. So I'd say passion, hard work, and then having the right relationships and connections.
Thank you very much for that. I like your list. Uh, let's turn to Western Sydney a little bit. So, how did you become involved with Western Sydney Women? How did that grow?
Well, I actually started Western Sydney Women, the base business, 5 years ago, to help women become economically independent and confident, because it's only when a woman, a girl, a woman, any age, has her own financial independence does she have choices in life and can make the right choices for herself and for her children. And confidence a big piece to that as well. So I started that to help, the 1.5 million women in Western Sydney, and also be fun and make the process fun. So we run a lot of free workshops for, financial literacy, money smart, job readiness, and things like that. But then we started to realize there was a need for Western Sydney business women. So women who, run a small business, often people who run a small business don't feel they have the support as big business. They do. We just help facilitate that and help build that community. And then we have Western Sydney executive women. So it's for women who are on boards, CEOs, and so forth that have a connection to Western Sydney. And before you know it, we have all these brands and all these programs and awards program that we run every year, profiling women. And we reached this current month, just online through our social media, we reached up to 1 million women, and our engagement was about 180,000. So it's definitely filling a need, and that's another thing. So this came out of a passion for me, because I'm a Western Sydney girl, born and raised, and I found that I didn't have the opportunities and the pathways that other regions did, which is fact. And there's a stigma attached to being from Western Sydney, which is why I did a TEDx talk on the stigma for Western Sydney. And I wanted to break that, but not even break it from externally, because personally, I didn't really care too much about what other people thought. It was more of the fact that I wanted from the inside out. I wanted the women and the girls and the next generation to say, well, no, this is who I am, this is my passion, and we're going to facilitate them to succeed.
Does that carry over into the virtual space as well? Again, I'm thinking in terms of this current paradigm that we face of, not being able to get together and assemble as we normally would, whether you're in Western Sydney or someplace else. So
Yes.
how can you carry that over into this period where we have to relate to each other at more distance?
Well, we have a very strong online community. So we've done online and offline very well from the beginning. I knew that we needed a combination of online essentially to connect women that didn't have the time to go out to workshops and events face to face, and that you need online in general to build momentum and community and to have a larger reach. So that was a given from the beginning. So we have a strong Instagram following. Our Facebook reach is quite extensive. We have a Facebook group just for Western Sydney business women, and that engagement is quite high. And we are now running in this environment in particular to help them weekly Facebook live sessions with an expert. Yesterday we had one, for HR. We'll have one next week on PR, and so women have it right then and there for them online from wherever they are to say, right, this is how you can grow your business or learn while you're in lockdown, essentially. We've always had a strong online presence. We have a mailing list, website, and we engage with women constantly. And regardless of what your business is, there's a need for both online and offline. And our offline, even though we can't do face to face, we now send out things to people. So we send out actual packs or letters or gifts to our program, or mentees or anything like that, just to keep that connection.
Thanks for that. Let me just remind those who have joined us today, if you want to ask Amanda a question, you've got the chat feature down below in WebEx, and just send us a question over the chat feature. Hey, Amanda, we've got one now from, it looks like Rian Agarwal. Consider, and if I've mispronounced your name, I apologize. Considering prevailing disruptions to supply chains and general market outreach, is it possible to build relationships with relevant actors in the United States?
Of course, you can build a relationship during any environment. I think that the key is to not look at the overall environment that you're in per se, but look at the person you are and the person you want to build the relationship with. I find that when I actually thrive in environments where it's difficult and people are distracted, because that's when you can actually build those relationships while everyone else is avoiding it. You can go in and be very targeted to who you want to build them with. But there's always a way. So and that's where entrepreneurship comes into it. So if it looks like there isn't a particular way to do something, then you've just found an opportunity to make a way. But I say now is the time to actually reach out and build those connections, especially with supply chains, both nationally and internationally, things that haven't happened before. You'd be surprised, especially in the US, and I found this because I was a part of the Select USA delegation, of what opportunities there are between Australia and United States in business. So they're always, they've got things we need, and we might have ideas that they need, and they've got the resources to make it, come to fruition. But also with supplies, just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean it can't happen. That's how businesses succeed. They find a gap, they find something that hasn't happened before and do it. So I say, if anything, now's the time to contact, like I said before, the relationships, go to the US consulate, go to Austrade, talk to the right people to say, right, this is what I'm thinking of, and start that relationship building now, because then in 6 months from now, that could really thrive.
In starting to build these relationships now, are there any things that the audience should be aware, particularly if you're Australian trying to build a relationship with an American, and you may have met them before, you may not have met them before. Are there any tips you can give on how to effectively communicate with Americans?
Um, yes, you know what they do like? They like you to say it as it is. Okay, so no beating around the bush. And they really don't like to waste time. So essentially, it's like dealing with me in a lot of ways. Just cut to the chase, be genuine, be upfront, be authentic, and let them know what's in it for them. They'll ask you questions, and I think this is what shocks a lot of Australians, that people in the US will straight out ask you some hard questions about your idea and about what you want to do, and don't be offended by that. See that as a blessing, because if they're asking you questions, then they genuinely want to do business with you and they just want to know more details about it. So they don't like to waste time. They'll have fun. They don't like to waste time. So if anything, be very clear about what it is that you want or what you're thinking, and say, hey, what do you think? But also look at, speak to the right people as well. So maybe not go direct to a business, or you might already be going direct to a business, but look at all the support networks you have here in Australia and the embassies, and the consulates, and say, right, this is what I'm thinking. A particular, it could be grants, could be, events like I mentioned, Select USA before, which I think is a great opportunity for anyone in Australia that's looking to go to the US to start a business. When things are back up and running, I mean, you can do it online now and talk to key people, but to physically go out and speak to a whole range of people representing different states is great. But very much, don't beat around the bush, say it as it is, and don't be offended that they're going to interrogate the hell out of you to find out more. It's actually a good thing.
I didn't realize we asked so many probing questions.
It's good.
Any advice you would give the other way, for any Americans listening in today trying to be more effective at communicating with Aussies?
Yes, I would say that the United States have a lot to offer businesses in Australia, especially if they want to expand into the US, or even not. But I'd say learning and development for in Australia, we've got a lot that we can learn, because the US scale very well. And I think Australia, just based on our size, we're not very, haven't been trained on scalability very well. I think that's something that we could learn, but also understand that when dealing with Australia, we don't understand the opportunities that are in each state for growing our business. It could be based on, it could be manufacturing, it could be electricity prices, for example, it could be whatever it is. Educate Australians more on what's available, because we just think, oh, the United States, and often, like in any country, all we see is what we see on the news. And really, we should turn the news off and deal with the people and deal with, the economic departments of each state and say, well, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you have available? But educate us. So educate the Australian business community on what's available and how easy it actually is for us to be able to expand internationally and first off in the US.
Good advice for even us here at the embassy. I know one thing that we've tried to do, and especially Ambassador Culverhouse has tried to do, is remind Australians how big our economic relationship is. According to recent polling, we've seen that a lot of times Australians will think of other countries, I won't name them, as being a bigger economic partner than the United States of America. And honestly, we are your biggest economic partner at a macro level, but in terms of small business, I think these are some of the relationships where we can do more with, particularly in the startup, venture capital, the energy and passion that surrounds small entrepreneurs. So point well taken. Let me work in a question, if I could, from Dominic Flanagan. How do we help bring our clients from a shutdown fear mindset towards a creative mindset under the current conditions?
It depends on who the clients are. I think, shutdown in any environment is bad. So it's like going through anything in life. If you just, because I see, having that shutdown mindset is actually blocking things out. You're not facing it. Because the thing is, the hardest thing to do in life is face reality. So I think don't be like everyone else. So when dealing with clients and customers, people are coming up with the same information constantly. Oh, we're following the rules and, communicating that way. What people want is they want a way out. So you've got to help them with that way out. Show them the light at the end of the tunnel. Give them options. Give them mind maps. Give them step-by-step processes of how they themselves can mentally and literally succeed in this environment. So a lot of clients are like, oh no, I'm not spending any money because I'm worried about where my money's going. And it's like, fine, if you don't want to spend money, at least do this on your business and prepare for the future. they will be grateful for you offering that. And then when they are comfortable to spend money again, they'll spend it with you. Those that do want to spend money, but they're not quite sure on what, you need to educate them just like before, but with probably a bit in a more gentle manner of this is the best way to spend their money. And that comes back to the previous point about trust. If your clients trust you, they will listen to you. And you got to take that responsibility seriously, because people are very scared about where they're going to spend their money and what decisions they need to make. So you need to help them. And if you can't help them, connect them to other people that can. And that will build your brand and the trustworthiness for the future. But very much it's communicating with them with a positive approach, but a very hands-on approach, and lead by example. What are you doing visually online to show people that you're moving forward and you're still investing and you're making these sacrifices and choices? And then clients and customers will often follow.
And I would argue every bit as important during normal times as during this period now where we're living under COVID-19. We've got a question from Lauren Twine. Amanda, how would you translate your entrepreneurship and relationship building strategies into diplomacy right now?
Ooh, personally or just in general? I could do both.
I think both.
I'd say the attitude that I have would not change at all, regardless of what I'm doing and where I'm involved. But I think the skill set would be to often, when it comes to difficult situations, people can get very fearful and attack. And I think the entrepreneurial and the business mindset and community mindset that I have is very much take the opposite approach. So instead of the blame game or attacking others or shut down mentality, it's like, okay, let's unite. So I think that, diplomacy to me is community in a lot of ways. It's like, these are my people. This is what we represent. How can we connect with another group of people and what they represent and work together? So if anything, I would say it is, there's a massive gap in the market right now that not many people are taking advantage of. And that's the fact that the connections between different countries and different organizations and different groups, it's not there. There's a big gap where people are kind of becoming nationalistic, which is positive in a lot of ways to help with their particular area, but it can have a negative effect with the fact that it could prevent growth and relationship building. So I think it needs to be twofold. And I think people need to say there's a gap here, that we're not connecting with the right countries or the right diplomats, but we need to. And I think uniting on key important issues is what I would do. Personally, I would pick the area of, manufacturing, small business, startups, things like that, and say, right, how can we do some cross pollination of ideas and come up with a task force or something along those lines, especially with the Australian and the US, to say, how can we start working together now, start planning now to work together in an entrepreneurial way, in a community way, for when things come up, at the other end.
And a great answer. And I think you're helping to fill that gap right now. So thanks for that. Hey, we've got a different sort of question from Ben. Do you find that the pressure of tough times makes entrepreneurs more or less likely to support each other? How do you react to partners who are not coping with the moment?
That's a very good point. So I think tough times, firstly, will really shine a light on the character of an individual. I've been talking a lot about leadership, and everyone loves to be a leader when things are going great, but not everyone likes to lead when things are difficult. So I think that will really shine a light on people's resilience and in general, helping each other out. So that often a lot of people, unfortunately, only want to help out someone else when they get something in return. So that happens regardless if it's good times or bad times. What I do find, though, is that you can see those that invest in their community. So anyone, an entrepreneur that is giving to their community during tough times, they're the people you want to work with. They're the people that have an attitude and an understanding that you build during difficult times. You know, you can celebrate and thrive and still build during good times, but you build during difficult times. So reaching out to each other is key. I also want to add to that is that there are going to be entrepreneurs and people and leaders in general that are suffering. And I mean suffering as in they literally do not know how to handle this. They shouldn't be judged for that. They're not being vindictive in any way. They could just choke and realize I'm freezing up, I'm scared, or I just don't know what to do. And I think it is very important that regardless of what role you're currently in, if you can see someone go through that, privately reach out to them and say, hey, I've noticed you're not really doing much at the moment. Are you okay? I'm happy to bounce some ideas off with you. Just remember, we're all human. Yeah. And we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. So if you can reach out to someone and say, even if it's just a 1 hour conversation, that to give them some ideas for them to be, oh, that's right. I never thought of that. You know, great. Thanks for that. And they go and apply it. That's, to me, that's true entrepreneurship, to help others behind the scenes. Don't publicly let anyone know you're helping anyone. I believe in doing that privately. So don't judge anyone that's not doing anything proactive. You sit back and say, hey, firstly, do they need some help? Reach out to them and help with them. If those that are taking advantage of others during this time, then you know that you need to cut ties with them.
Couldn't agree with you more on all counts. Especially now more than ever is the time to be there for each other.
Yes.
Now more than ever is the time to make sure that those of us who are maybe having a little bit more of a challenge in dealing with current conditions, that we're there, that we're supporting each other, that we're there for each other, that we're building those relationships and really expanding those relationships. Just personally, I have never spoken on the telephone as much as now since I was maybe a teenager back in high school. But it's just a way of trying to compensate and still be connected to maintain those connections. Hey, Amanda, I cannot thank you enough. We're at time. I benefited personally greatly from this conversation. So thank you for your for sharing your wisdom and your inspiration and your passion. I think your passion for people and for what you do and the energy, the startup energy definitely comes through in everything that you said. So thank you for being there for this community today, for part of our series of Diplomacy Delivered. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Just in closing, is there, in thinking about the conversation today, is there anything that we didn't touch on, any points that you thought that you would want to make before you go?
Me, I just want everyone to still enjoy life. This is not the end of the world. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and to have fun. So if you've got some time up your sleeve, be creative in your business, reach out, connect with others, and you know at the end of this, you'll be glad that you didn't just put your hand in the sand essentially and give up.
Perfect last word. Amanda, thank you. Much appreciated. To our audience, thank you for spending an hour of your day with us. We really appreciate it. Good to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.